everyone. As a reminder, we're recording the meeting today. So I'm Krista Boucher. I'm your host for the member comment period today. Welcome to the Opalco board meeting. So our members are invited to ask questions or share comments during the first part of the meeting, and we'll have some time at the end for any follow-up questions. A few reminders: keep yourself muted. And then if you want to make a comment or ask a question, you can put it into the chat feature, and then staff will put it into the queue and unmute you when your turn comes up, and you'll have 3 minutes to make a comment. The materials for today's meeting are posted online in our document library. They're posted each month in the week preceding the board meeting. So I have a couple of quick updates today. We're excited that we have a new person on our communications team, Jo Lang. You'll see her, she's got her headphones on. She joins the team. She's a UW alumni in their communications department. She moved to Orcas Island in May, and you'll start seeing her on social media and around the islands, helping with our outreach efforts. So.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. It's really lovely to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and I look forward to seeing you all more moving forward.
Well, welcome, and we're lucky to have
So we hope everyone is planning to come to our historical museum exhibit that opens this afternoon at 2 p.m. So after the meeting today. So we, including our line crew who helped build part of the exhibit, will be there from 2 to 4 with snacks and refreshments and to talk about the history of getting power to the islands. Our next thing is that we're in the home stretch of giving away these Washington State energy credits to our members. They are now giving out to moderate income households. So a family of 4 with an income of up to $152,000 may qualify for the credit. So please pass along to all your friends, apply. You may just get it. And we've given out about half of the funds that we have, and we have just a little over 2 weeks left for people to apply. So let your friends know, encourage everyone to apply. It's really easy. You just need your Opalco account number. I think that's the hardest part. So yeah. The next thing is we have our Island Way workshop about our tidal generation project, and specifically regarding the current grant we have with the Department of Energy. So that is on August 27th at 5 p.m. It's a virtual workshop, and you can email us at communications@opalco.com to get the link to that, to register for that event. So are there any comments from the members in the audience today? I don't see any right now. So that concludes our member comment period. So we'll move into our agenda, Vince.
Thank you, Krista. So we can welcome all to our August board meeting. First item on the agenda this morning is the consent agenda. On that, I'm looking for a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda.
So moved.
And that's Mark. Is there a second? Got that, Brian? Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed or abstentions? Hearing none, that passes. Okay, second item this morning is the annual election of board officers. We've had this extended a couple of times because of absences, so we got everybody on board this morning. And let's see, Foster, why don't you take us through the process by which we will do that this morning?
You bet. I think everyone has Nancy Loomis's through the chat function, has the ability to reach her.
Right.
So we're going to request that individual board members chat with Nancy and make their selection on who they vote for the 3 positions, and we'll do those individually, starting with the president. You can see the current slate of officers that we have, and with that, why don't we call the president election process open and request that the individual board members chat with Nancy about their selection.
Foster,
if we could have a motion on each of those 4 total. Thank you.
I'd like to ask Vince if he'd be willing to serve another year, given all of the great work he's doing with the Climate Advisory Committee and for Opalco.
Yeah, I second that. I agree.
I will do it if chosen, yes.
you may consider that a motion.
Clarification real quick, Joel.
No
So
need to second it. We can just do it on motion and then everyone can vote. And then Nancy can reveal after each, or we could do it all as one slate, whatever's.
Oh, okay. Would you
I
like me to
think you could
restate
do a
motion or
slate,
hold it?
yeah.
Okay. That's fine.
is there any need for, or is there any other recommendations other than Vince?
I would ask if Jerry is willing to be vice president again.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, I'm quite happy to continue on as vice president.
Then that begs the question for the secretary treasurer then.
Brian?
I suggest that we give someone else a chance. I think it could be good to get one of our newer members and see if they're willing to do that.
Okay, that's fair. Do you want to nominate one of them, or are we asking for a volunteer?
Volunteer, although I think they're all would be wonderful.
Certainly. Tom, do you have time on your hands?
I could do that, actually. Sure.
Great.
Terrific.
Okay, so we have a slate with Vince, Jerry, and Tom.
Okay, so you can all vote to Nancy, and then Nancy, once you receive it, why don't you let us know?
Is that a yes or no for the full slate, Joel?
Yes.
Yes, I move that the slate is Vince, Jerry, and Tom.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark.
You got it.
All right, send your chats to Nancy.
Vince, just a
Yeah,
one
sure.
clarification. Do we go to chat at the bottom of the screen, or
Yeah. Click on the chat thing.
it just says meeting group chat down there?
And if you pick if you pick the drop down, you'll be able to see Nancy's name near the bottom of the drop down.
Oh, I see. Sorry.
Yeah, you need to just scroll down.
All good. All right, the votes are in. It's unanimous for the slate.
Very good. Thanks, Nancy.
And Vince, I wanted to say thank you for this year and then many years before about all your volunteerism. I've never seen anyone work as hard and really understand and research the amount of information that it takes for a utility. And I really wanted to give you a big shout out because you have been instrumental in help guiding our ship here. And thank you very much. And thank you for volunteering to do it again. It's been fantastic having you at the helm. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that. Okay, excellent. So let's keep doing good work here. All right, next item. Q2 2024 financial report, Foster.
And why don't we move over into the third quarter reports, a separate attachment. It's on the website, by the way, if anyone's interested.
Okay, got it.
Our guys at work doing great work. Nice pulled change out. We're having, let's see here, this is the second quarter for 2024. We're having a really stellar year. We always pride ourselves in not over collecting from the membership or under collecting from the membership. And I think we're doing a pretty admirable job at this time of the year, and really have been balancing our economics quite well. If you look up the income summary, our revenue is higher than we originally budgeted, which is always good. It's really interesting when you look at HDD, which is heating degree days lower just a little bit. It's nice to know that we have the operating revenue that we do. We're suspecting that we're seeing a little bit more kilowatt hour usage from people that are in our service territory longer, right? We used to have more second homeowners that didn't frequent the location as much as they do now, is what we're starting to see. And their usage goes up accordingly. So our revenue does as well. So our revenue looks really good, really impressed with that. On the expense side, you'd expect to see our power purchases a little bit higher accordingly. And then our expense profile is lower overall. So that's a really good mixture. Our operating margin is higher. We're only in the second quarter right now, but it's nice to lead into the end of the year in a good financial position. Our net margin is higher. Remember, our goal is to raise up our equity, because that we use that equity to justify the borrowings that we have with RUS, and having our equity position climbing. You can see that we were budgeted for an equity percentage of 40%, and we're at 41.1, which is a really instrumental and very needed increase to our equity position. We need to keep that trend going. I mentioned the HDD, and you can kind of see what that is, and you can see our purchases and sales are above what we anticipated, which is really good news, because we've probably had a little bit of an El Nino condition or warmer weather conditions, and usually we start seeing less revenue collected than not. So it's a good balance for our service territory.
Yeah,
Foster, one question. Has BPA been stable so far? Anticipating a crack or anything of that nature going forward?
Yeah, BPA seems to be pretty stable. I'm not seeing any big cracks on the horizon. That's a cost recovery clause that's invoked with Bonneville if they're under what their economics look like. What they've been doing is they've been hitting the secondary market and making some money doing that. So anything that they've needed to make up in their financials has been collected through that secondary market. And the secondary market has been pretty darn lucrative with, selling to California and other states that desperately need power, especially hydropower that's reliable and renewable and so forth. So, yeah, so Bonneville looks like they're pretty darn stable.
Thank you.
This year.
So Foster, my question is, given that kilowatt hour purchases are higher than budgeted, anticipated, but heating degree days are lower, is that across all of our tariff classes? Is it across all of our customer classes, or is it concentrated, in residential, as you said, or as you alluded to earlier? Maybe we've got more full-time residents now, but is there an effect there where you're seeing more purchases in commercial as well, or?
Yeah, why don't we thumb down to that one really quick? We can get into the detail, and we can break out the revenue components. But I like the question. Well, for the longest time after the pandemic, we were, trying to gauge, how many people were here and what classes were up. And you can see primarily it's all the residential side. In fact, the commercial is pretty much treading water.
Yeah.
29 is about consistent what we have. So we're seeing a lot more residential people here. And then the other fees are pretty minor as well.
Yeah.
So it's primarily residential, which we would expect. I mean, that's our utility is primarily residential. Even our commercial kind of acts like residential, if you will. Good question though, Mark. Let's go back.
Foster, another question for you. How close are we to meeting our tier 1 limits at this point?
Or, oh, tier 1 limits. Okay, so you're talking about Bonneville Power Administration. The
Yeah.
majority, the overwhelming majority of our power comes from Bonneville's tier 1. That's the lowest priced kilowatt hour charges that Bonneville has. It's our slice of the dam system as a preference customer of Bonneville. So we're really tickling our we're entering into load growth that goes into tier 2, and that's a more expensive proposition for us. I would say that we're pretty well off for this year, Jerry. We're at tier 1. We're at the top of the tier 1. We're just starting to spill over into tier 2. Not a lot right now. So if you look at it as a kind of an average or a composite rate, you're not seeing a really big uptick on the tier 2 or the power pricing, because the majority of it is still the lower tier 1 pricing. In the future, you're hitting something that's really important for us to understand, is that any load growth that we have that's a bit above and beyond our tier 1 is going to be really expensive power. And as that percentage goes up and up, so were our rates and our power costs. And that's going to be a real issue as we electrify more heating, transportation, picture the ferries out there in the future. That's going to be a larger load as well. And then we counter that with some of the solar that's been basically implemented in our service territory as well. That kind of moderates us and has moderated us for a little bit now. So far we're looking pretty good, Jerry.
Foster, just to nail it down a little bit, I seem to remember reading a document a long time ago. I thought it was like 210,000 megawatt hours is like the tier 1 number for us.
Yeah, I mean, I would say you probably have the number pretty accurate. It goes, we were always going to be selling around or buying around 220 million kilowatt hours. And anything above and beyond that is where we start tickling into higher price power. So thanks for that reference point.
Foster, would it be possible to kind of give us a report and add it to this report as to how much headroom we have at any given point in time, just so we can see that narrowing as we expect time going forward?
Yeah, let me look at that one. I kind of like where you're going. I was thinking the same thing of how much we tickle into that. I know the rate structure of Bonneville is a little bit more complicated than that, but let me see what we can come together as staff to try to balance that. They do a rate structure that's like a 2-year look ahead, and then what it does is it does some true up mechanisms, so it's a little harder to target it to tier 1 versus tier 2. But let me see what we can come up with, because I think that's a pretty good visual, Jerry.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jerry, I think it's a good idea. And the other thing I want to point out too is that that we're looking to be signing the new contract with BPA sometime in 2025. Is that correct, Foster?
Yeah, we're looking to sign it at the end of this year, maybe spills over into 2025.
And so they're going to nail down what everybody's tier 1s are too. And the other thing is that reading some documents BPA's put out, that they're setting their average megawatt hour number at something like 7,800, and that's it. That's all there's going to be, and there's going to be more people chasing that power going forward. So, I fully expect that all 134 of us or something like this are very close to the tier 1 numbers already, and they're not making any more, and everybody's going to have some growth going on. So I think it's going to be important to watch that, because we're all going to be getting market purchases.
Yeah, I would echo that. Bonneville's purposely going to that same number too. When they're coming up with their new contract, they're looking at the tier 1 allocation and trying to keep the utilities that are in the preference customer range to be in their average megawatt range that they've been historically. And then anything above and beyond that, if they have excess water, is what goes to market purchases. What everyone should take away from this is our power rates are going up, certainly for any load growth that's going to hit the tier 2 level. The tier 2, according to projections that we see at our power resource group, PNGC, are projected to go up into $85. Right now we buy our tier 1 for about 42 to 45 per megawatt, and we're looking at more than doubling that with tier 2. Now, because we have a small portion and we grow that tier 2, it becomes increasingly detrimental to our price structure. Then in the very near future, call it when Power Resources was Centralia being shut down at the end of 2025, we think the post 26, call it January 26, is going to be really expensive, and that trajectory is pretty unknown right now. But we don't see a lot of generation projects being brought online, even though there's a lot of hope for new generation to be brought online. They're not happening nearly as quickly as people had hoped. So stay tuned. I could probably try to figure out that maybe there's a way that we could balance how much tier 2 we use and what we see that price structure is to, Jerry. So maybe there's a way I could tie that into $1 as well.
Do you have any comments, Foster, with regard to any additional flexibility we will get being part of PNGC?
I don't yet. I mean, we're working through the details right now. There's some side discussions going on between PNGC and Bonneville about operating as a joint operating entity, which treats, there was an act of Congress in 2000, I think it was 2001, that looked at PNGC as a collective made up of individual members, but treated as one meter. And we're working through those components for the next contract to see how that treatment is going to occur and the benefits that go along with it. So stay tuned. Yeah, I'll give you updates as we know more and more about those.
Foster, do you know if all the other members are interested in this? Do the other members think it's valuable?
The other members of PNGC are extremely interested. In fact, there's been probably 4 new member utilities joining PNGC recently because they see the power price spike in the future of tier 2 power going through the roof and really don't have any other options. If they go it alone, you really don't have any economies of scale. Join PNGC, that's the reason we joined, and there's another, I would say, 5 utilities that are on that list. We've got 2 new ones, and it wouldn't surprise me that 3 more join in short order.
Hey, Foster, let me make a comment. And again, why I very much support watching our load in the market prices and stuff like that. This last week, I've had a chance to do a deep dive into 2 data sources. So one is Bonneville Power Administration. Buried deep in their transmission section is a document that's updated as of May 2024 that's got a list of all of the requests to connect to new transmission. And I went through that, and it's really interesting because it adds up to about 208,100 and something gigawatts worth of stuff. But when you dig down into the spreadsheet and column Q, P, and G, we just got the status of the programs, and they managed to keep a vast amount of stuff that's been withdrawn from requests. When you get all down to it, the actual reality is that out of that 208 gigawatts worth of stuff, there's 8 gigawatts that are turned on, and those go back to like the early 2000s or so. The rest of it, there's like 181,000 gigawatts worth of stuff that is in study or study completed phase. And that means that, they're thinking about that. There's not a commensurate amount of new transmission being recognized to connect all that stuff to. And most of that stuff is phantom at this point. Some of those requests go in 5 or 6 years and then disappear. There's like 134,000 gigawatts of stuff that's been withdrawn from requests, but they're still in the spreadsheet. So that's one thing to think about, because that goes back to this phenomenon we've seen, that they're shutting down. Centralia goes down, Colstrip's going down. And so the fossil fuel stuff is disappearing much faster than renewable is being built. And another way to do that is you correlate the Bonneville data with, you go to the Northwest Power and Conservation Council, and you can dig down deep into their stuff. And they've got a tiny little heading where you can click on an Excel spreadsheet, and that's got the same status. It's got all of the generating resources in the Pacific Northwest, and it's got all the stuff that is proposed or studied or looked, and there's comments on it. And you get the same thing. So when you add it all up, you wind up with the PNUCC chart, which shows why there's about 12,000 megawatts worth of stuff that's not there starting from 2025 on to 2026. So what I read into that is that there's a disconnect between what the Department of Commerce thinks is happening and what's really happening on the ground. And the final straw is you go to the Department of Commerce is the Energy Facility Site Review Council, or EFSEC, and you look at the projects that are actually of significance in there that are in the states for permitting, and none of that 130,000 megawatts worth of stuff that shows up on those other things has even started permitting for most of those. And given that some of those are taking 6 to 10 years, I think we've got a real problem on our hands in the Pacific Northwest.
Well, there's no question about it. We've spent a lot of our time at PNGC looking at supply and demand issue. The demand is going up and the supply is not. And I think that's going to be disheartening for us going forward. And
I think another concern is transmission. Bonneville actually has upped their capital program for transmission in the last couple of years, but there probably need to be almost 5 to 10 times more to meet those new resources. So that's a real concern, has connected to with the people who are putting in the queue, but they're just not making any big transmission investments.
You know what, the other thing on transmission that was enlightening that I learned at PNGC was how much is being built by California into the Pacific Northwest outside the state of California. So while Bonneville and our region is being really not producing a lot of transmission that's much needed, so you could move those, the renewable projects that are built are not really being brought to power as fast as we would like. But boy, California is more than willing to connect their transmission to it and see if they can take it out of the region, which really undermines our ability to use it as well. So every once in a while I read a report and it references that we're going to use Montana wind, for instance. And you kind of wonder whether or not that's already going to be contracted for from California.
As
Well, they're making a big investment.
Go ahead, Brian.
Ryan?
Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I was just going to say, California is making big investments, Montana, Wyoming, Arizona.
Yeah.
Outside their territory.
Go ahead, Tom.
And my question is our load growth fairly predictable? Has there been any surprises over the years with our forecasts versus actual? And if we look ahead the next 2 to 3 years, are we pretty confident of the trajectory we think it's going to go?
I think we're getting better at it, Tom. When the pandemic hit, we had a lot of people stay longer and basically work from home here, and we saw some uptick in numbers. We were curious on whether they were going to last long, but I think we have a good understanding now that people are able to work remotely here, certainly with our internet being successful as well. So I think we're seeing more load growth there from the people that spend more time in their homes. It's less about new homes. It's more about occupying the existing homes more. It's still not tremendous load growth. We're still looking at, in the 1% range, which is doable. And we also have new solar connected, and that seems to be counterbalance or moderating load growth as well. So it's kind of a good pluses and minuses for us. What gets a little nervous is when you get into the price escalations of that tier 2. Those are dramatic. I mean, we're talking doubling and then tripling the tier 2 power, and anything that happens to the generating resources that we have, and over time that load growth really impacts us when you're talking that magnitude of pricing increase.
So
Jerry, was that where you were going with that in terms of the tier 2 concern? That we're just heading into a higher percentage of price volatility and uncertainty?
Yeah.
So with going into the tier 2, what I was wondering when you're talking about putting this graph together is whether there's a way to include those economics in it, because if you're going from 45 and basically doubling it for the tier 2, if there were a way to get that in the graph where then we could do an overlay of adding other projects like Baylor Hill or the tidal turbine on top of it and showing how those get the rates back into the tier 1, I think that would be really helpful for people to understand better, because we articulate how important this is, but without any actual numbers. But I think when you show the numbers and how those projects would help keep us in the tier one, that might make those projects more appealing to the members.
Yeah, I like where your guys are going. Let me see what I can come up with that. I got a couple ideas. The one thing that really hits home to me is our prices are really low at, 42 to 45 a megawatt. We think that, once you get into renewables where we get a Baylor Hill and so forth, we know those prices are going to be above that tier one level, Wendy, but they're not going to be, triple, right? So what we can do is we can lock in a little bit higher of a price point is what our goal is, but it lasts for a 20, 25-year period. So let me see what we can come up with. There's a lot of really good information going around in my head right now. Let's see what we can put in
Yeah, because it offsets that $80 tier two and
Right.
somewhere in the middle. So it'll show why it's actually economically beneficial to do it.
You bet. You bet. Good idea. Thank you. Any other questions? Why don't
Okay.
we motor through these really quick? Good finances. I mean, basically, this is a good year for us. We can just kind of motor through some of the graphs now, Russell. We've kind of gone through that section pretty well. Our kilowatt hour purchase is a little bit higher. We kind of went through all those. Let's go to the graphs. HDD is lower, which was kind of surprising. I was thinking that we're going to be a little bit higher. We started looking at the NOAA graphs a little bit earlier in the year, and it looked like we were going to turn into a colder situation with La Nina. But we really haven't seen that for the beginning part of this year. We'll see whether or not those predictions come true by the last two quarters. We don't really see notable differences in the HDD until the winter time, either January, February, or November, December. So stay tuned for those. Let's go to the next one. Our revenue tracking a little bit higher. It's always nice to see. I mean, you can still with the scale here to see a little bit of separation between the gray and the blue being the actual is a good thing. So you can see our revenue is a little bit higher. But usually we track that pretty well. I mean, we understand what our cost profiles are and our revenue and so forth. We're doing pretty well for the last few years.
Yeah, right on.
You can see the breakdown for what are the cost components that we have that are going up and down. And again, if you looked at very consistent, if you're going to be selling more power, obviously your power costs are going to go up. But to keep our expenses more moderated, that's a great thing for us to do. I also do want to point out that we now have full staff members for our G&A group that includes Beth, Krista, and now Joe. So that's going to allow us to really have some good communications with the membership, but there is going to be a financial implication. Those are full-time positions that have always been budgeted for, but we finally filled them all. Let's keep going. Depreciation, a little bit different than we thought. I mean, if you looked at the economics, depreciation, interest, and taxes is a little bit different. But overall, it's it's a great year so far, even when you put in the anomalies for those components. You see those going up a little bit because our interest rates are going up more than not. And it's always nice to see our tier higher than not. That what the tier does is it translates to times interest earned ratio, how much you can pay off your debt, and if your risk profile is within expectations. So we're right in line with that. And our debt, you can kind of see where we are a little bit below what we budgeted for, more of a timing thing than anything. Equity a little bit higher. That's always nice to see. That coincides with the margin, both operating and regular margin. We're doing really well. I wish we could replicate this year every year. Statement of operation, there's just some of the breakdowns if you wanted to get into what we just talked about with Mark with the residential versus commercial and other. And some of the breakdowns. And then we get into the next section of balance sheet is all consistent with what you'd expect to see. Oh, we have the notable drivers. You can kind of see the revenue is higher because we sold more kilowatt hours. Same thing with the cost of power a little bit being a little bit elevated. But our expense profile lower, even though that we've filled a couple positions. So we're doing pretty darn well. So notable drivers, that gives you the detail on why we have ups and downs in those cost categories. Our balance sheet, really strong. That's where we should be. I'd like to see our equity up a little bit higher. Again, in order for us to borrow funds for a future submarine cable that we got, I think the next one that we're planning for is between Lopez and Shaw, and then Shaw to Orcas.
Mhm.
And that's going to be, we all know submarine cables are really expensive. They've gone even more expensive in that inflation factor. And we need to really take that into consideration. So having that equity up as high as we can get it. As a point of reference, when we started the submarine cable that was pretty expensive in between Lopez and San Juan, our equity position was about 67%. Right now we're at the 42 level. So just put that bookmark in your head that we'd like to see those numbers higher. The neat thing about our Rock Island is that they're, as they hit break-even numbers and increase in the profitability, even without the dollars transitioning into Opalco's balance sheet, the equity numbers automatically do. So that'll increase our equity percentage as well. So all's good on that front. Keep going down.
Foster, could you just go back to the penalties and elaborate a little bit on that? Sorry, that was on your income statement.
Sure. These are basically the when our fees that we charge when people hook up and so forth into our service territory. It's pretty consistent over the years. I'd have to give you a longer trend on it, but these are pretty consistent with what our penalties and fees add up to over the different years. But that's miscellaneous charges that we have from our.
So these are penalties for our customers, not Opalco penalties from Bonneville then?
No, strictly from our membership. And it's also made up. I just want to make sure it's more than it's not just penalties, it's other.
Is the bulk of it actually connection fees?
If you can, Nancy or Travis, do you have a detail of what makes up that one? I don't have that one at my fingertips. What makes up that category?
I guess my real question is the increase that we see an increase in late fees or an increase in people connecting?
Connections, yeah.
I need to pull out the detail there so I don't mislead the group. Why don't we come back to that one?
That's fine. It's a minor amount, but it's just an interesting question.
I always like to really have everybody understand what that is, because we roll up that category and it's made up of a handful of accounts. Let's keep going and we'll come back to that line item. All good on the membership side. In our debt figures, you can kind of track where they are. Now remember, ever since we implemented our Switch It Up program, those include RUS debt for the Switch It Up. So you can see that escalation. That's where the majority of the increases come from. It's from the 68 or whatever number we had for the Switch It Up. What we do is we draw those monies down once we loan them out, once the members take advantage of the program.
Right. It's not the total potential amount that we could do in the Switch It Up program. It's actual draws.
Correct. Thank you. Keep going. Cash flow, here's the audited cash flow statement with the changes in the accounts. What we do is, to give you a better representation, we do a non-GAAP version. If you want to go to the next one, it's kind of easier to follow. What we did is we rarely do people predict what's going to go on with their balance sheet. They usually focus on budgeting on the income statement, but cash is king. And we always make a purposeful estimation on what's going to be going on with our cash flow. We come up with this cash flow so we can budget it, what we're doing with those estimations, to make sure that we can tread water, so to say, with our working capital. And what we do is we do a high level comparison for budgetary purposes, and then we compare our actuals to that so you can really track it. It's been a very useful tool for us. And it's very consistent with what our estimations were, and includes, I like that big note, 5.1 in rest borrowing. It's for the net borrowing category, but suffice it to say that we're positioned well on the cash side, even when we got involved with the Switch It Up rest program. We're still treading water really well with that. That was one of the concerns the board had when we originally got into it, because we were taking on a lot more debt, but since it was going through the membership and paying to them for the 2% repayment fee, if you will, it's really turned out a big benefit for the members, and they're really taken up on it. There's a good chart we're gonna see when we get back into the regular board report that has those figures in it. Let's go to the next one. This is our construction projects that we have. This is just to remind everybody, or Wendy, for instance, what we do is we're required to report our construction projects according to our RUS standards, right? So we go through Department of Agriculture when we set up as a co-op, and we follow, this is known as a 740C form. So we always apologize for the oddity when it comes to all the numbers, but this is very standard within the RUS reporting cycle, and we use their cost codes accordingly. So as we track these, you can kind of see what they all translate to. I don't know if you want to pull out anything in particular, Russell, but you can see under column F, that's the budget variance. We've really been doing well in the ARPA funds, right? Remember, we got a grant for $15 million, a little under that. And part of that grant is deploying fiber to different areas of our community that were unserved. And part of that, what we're doing is we're sharing it and upgrading our conductors. If we have deficient conductors in those line segments, that we would be upgrading for fiber. And so we have a couple of categories in this, what we're looking at right now, that gives us an opportunity for us to replace some of the conductor in those trenches and share the cost. We have, half the cost come out of here and the other half from the ARPA side, so to say. So it's been a really big win for us to upgrade our facilities as well as provide fiber to the members in those areas. And is there any particular topic other than maybe the solar side you want to get into, Russell?
The largest driver is that solar side and the continual delay in permitting from San Juan County. And there was some good movement there, but continues to be delays. And then on the ARPA side, just when this budget was set up, the ARPA group hadn't transmitted quite when the reimbursements would be doing, because that's a complicated thing, getting the grant funds into our accounting sometimes. But this has been flowing very well, but it's just not as we predicted in the budget time. So there's a delay in ARPA funds there. You'll see, even though we're spending ahead of time, there is a lag in what we thought the monies were. But at the end of this project, we can guarantee Opalco's view of this will be net zero with these grant funds. So I'm not at all concerned with this. It's just a reporting issue at all.
What's really interesting is when you're an RUS borrower, which is fantastic. I mean, we almost get treasury rates for our interest rates when we get into construction projects. And it's a little backwards. What you do is you actually go out there and you build a project, and then you submit the dollars that you spent on those individual construction projects after the fact. That's that 219 reporting that we do every month. And then we actually can borrow the funds back. So it's a little timing delay, if you will. What Russell just said on the grant funds is more real-time pricing. So we're able to, once we work out all the details, we can actually get the cash flowing sooner than we would otherwise with RUS. And then the other thing I wanted to point out really quick was, if you look at the solar side, it's the category 15, a little tiny row. I think it's 25 if my old eyes work for me or not. You can see that's where the one side of the solar, That's the dollar side to build the solar site. That's where it's delayed. Normally that would be a much higher number in that little 20, whatever that number is.
35 there.
35. Thanks for that. And then down below, we have the grant funds that we've collected and member funds for the solar site. So that you'll see the offset
Zero.
down below. And that's where the oddity transpires because we have a delay in the project.
It's
And one, go ahead, Mark.
Oh, I was gonna ask a different question, so if you're still on.
Well, I did want to just, one anomaly that will be is with the award of the grant fund that was after budget time,
Mhm.
you know, we're going to have some additional grant funding coming in with Department of Energy for this title project, as we're going to talk about later in the month. And this budget item is going to be a little odd, but you know, as we discussed with the board, that grant project is going to continue on.
From an accounting perspective, what Russell just highlighted is we have the dollar expenditures located above the line, and above the line is that contribution to construction.
Mhm.
Those are the monies, the outflows. The monies that are inflows from grants and other sources are located below that, just so you know how the form works. And again, this is the form that's provided and we follow through RUS. I'm sorry.
My other question was about the transformers being higher than budget. Is that just a timing thing, or has there been further inflation in the cost of the new?
Yeah.
The inflation when it comes to the transformer has been crazy.
Yeah.
And I think you've kind of gathered that there was an issue with steel and the type of steel that was used and so forth. And the transformers were delayed until they figured that out. So now they're scarce, as you can imagine, supply and demand. And there's been a lot of escalation going on. And if you looked at a substation transformer, bless your soul, I mean, you really are paying some pretty high dollars for that. Is there anything you want to add, Russell?
Yeah, we also did switch vendors. You know, we've been soliciting more vendors for transformers. We've been soliciting. It's just now the lead times on one vendor is you know, exceeded multiple years. They can't even guarantee a shipment and when. Our most recent dependable vendor is you know, we've got slots planned out for the next coming years as far as quantities of transformers and types. So we do have a little more dependable of a flow, but you know, our Robert, our system engineer, is doing some more detailed planning of when those are coming in. The difficulty will be for budgeting purposes is the commodity pricing over that time. So as we lock them in, we still don't know pricing because we're locking in things in 2026.
Right.
We're locking in a substation transformer for 2027 right now. So that's it's very complicated and quite irritating as a planning effort and a financial planning effort.
So you
Same problem with residential service transformers, Russell, or is this just the substation transformers?
The substation transformer is one that we're planning very far out. The service transformers are the ones that we've got all of our slots for next year, and we're planning into 2026 right now.
And then
there's no end in that future from our vendors and the sales reps from what we see.
so they've been going up exponentially as well, Tom.
I lost track of the status of that, but it had to do with the EPA requirement that all these distribution transformers were supposed to go to grain-oriented steel instead of amorphous. And I know they filed a lawsuit against. Do we know what the status of this is? Is it still in the works, or has it been a decision?
I think it's still in the works. I know NRECA got heavily involved in that, and I could check with them and see if there's a status update on that lawsuit.
Because that's going to make a big difference.
It's still kind of in limbo from a lawsuit perspective. Most vendors are still looking into the amorphous steel. The biggest problem with that as residential, you know, our load profile is very small per residence. Those cores only really save you anything at high usage times.
Right.
So for us, it really doesn't show a energy efficiency additive for the price. For you know, those utilities that like to push their transformers to the edge of destruction in their depreciation window.
Service factor.
It actually does pay off a lot more, but then again, we get, you know, we're getting 40 to 50 years out of our transformers, which is a great thing for us.
Nancy has, by the way, back to the discussion of penalties. Nancy has a follow up in the chat. People might want to look at that. Goes back to a timing thing when it comes to penalties. If you're going to penalize somebody when they have a high power bill, which occurs in the winter time, then you're going to see higher penalties. And in the summertime, when you have less of a bill, because you're not going to have the heating load included in that, you're going to see less penalties. So it's more of a timing thing that she brought up. Thanks for the reminder on that, Nancy. Appreciate it. Let's keep going. We're getting into our Form 7. So this is required. This is basically the same financial. There's a little bit of different roll up when it comes to what RUS requires. I really like the form though. I mean, I've said it many times. I've gone back to the initial stages in the 30s and we filled out a financial report very similar to the Form 7 that you're seeing before you. They've rarely changed those. So it's always nice to go back in and see some of the older amounts and what's occurred. It was, I always think fondly of basically we got our submarine cable in 55 from Bonneville Power Administration. And then the year or the decade of the 60s was really challenging for Opalco because we had to distribute that power amongst our whole service territory. And we have 25 submarine cables, and you could just imagine the rush to get out submarine cables after that. So that's why we were, when you look at the financial reports over the years, it gets really interesting when you see some of the challenging decades that Opalco's had to face in the future. If you're ever curious, I love this little section that tells you there's a meter section right here. And it shows you how many we have. We're getting pretty close to 16,000 meters. And you can see our line miles. Every once in a while, people are curious about how much overhead, transmission, underground we have. Overwhelming distribution numbers for underground, which is wonderful. And that's the reason that our outages are way better than the mainland, is because of the prior board's decision to underground a lot of our distribution lines. Really, 90% of our distribution lines are now underground, which is unheard of in the utility space, especially when you live in a rock like we do that the glaciers couldn't even wipe clean.
Do we have a quick fact on the cost of undergrounding transmission, even if you could do it?
I think we allude to it in a handful of places, Vince, but I don't know if it goes directly.
The question always comes up, why don't they underground all that stuff too? And you get 46 mile and it's like $5 million a mile. So, you're looking at a $230 million project there. It's like,
Don't know how many times I've written that
I know.
paragraph in social media responses.
Yep.
Yeah, and that number's real, by the way. That number was PSE, and us comparing notes, and it was equivalent to a submarine cable for us, which is daunting when you really think about if you're going to underground it. And then what happens is two things. There's two unintended consequences. You need wider easements, right? So you're going to have to expand your easements because now you're talking transmission voltage. You have to bury it in concrete. And then if there is an outage in your transmission line, you have to go find it and get the equipment there to unbury it, fix it. It could take weeks, where right now, if it's above ground, we can locate where it is pretty quickly and get our system and our members back up with power in short order, not weeks.
So
by the way, that estimate of 5 million was 5-6 years ago. With inflation, that's closing in on 6 million.
Yeah, geez, yeah.
And just a correction, it is not the cost of a submarine cable. It's the size of our entire balance sheet or more.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, even the new submarine cables are going to be in that same category. It's like staggering what those numbers look like.
Mark, are those social media comments just in the context of right-of-way maintenance? Is that kind of?
Yeah, it comes up every single time. Every single time anybody sees us working in the right of way, like, why can't you underground this? So
sure.
Yeah, and I, on that same topic with right-of-way trimming, this is fire season, and I'm sure everyone has been watching the media about some of the major fires going on in Oregon, parts of Washington. There are, I think it was Benton Cooperative gave an update that they've had a whole section of their line that they haven't even been able to get to that has burnt down, and it's been 2 weeks. And they still can't get to their lines because the fires are still too dangerous for them to get into their service territories. It's really staggering. So we have to do what we do with our lines, and I think we do a very, we're as sensitive as we possibly can, but it gets, what was that number? The insurance figure for HECO, the Hawaii cooperative, was like, I think $1 billion was assigned to the utility, and the full liability was $4 billion.
Mhm.
Well, you can't even remotely get insurance for that, and that's where really big bankruptcy problems start for us. Anyway, on that note, we are done with the financials.
Also, one quick follow-on question. You mentioned the next two submarine cables, Lopez to shore and shore to AUKUS. Do you got any feeling about timing on those two?
Yeah, well, we're going to go and do a quick little analysis to see the condition of the cable where we can. Most of the time, what happens is the submarine cables there's a lot of movement down below with sand, and sometimes it gets severed. Sometimes we can see with an ROV layout really quick the condition of this cable. So we're going to do that analysis, and then we'll have a better understanding of, how far we can delay, if at all. We did the same thing between Lopez and San Juan, and we looked at the condition of the protection around the cable. Is when that starts corroding, it becomes very essential for us to get on that pretty quickly. And we don't have a status on that just yet, but we will shortly, Jerry.
Thank you.
Good question. I guess if we had in our long range on our capital plan, we're looking at 2030 to 2035 if there's a range, Jerry, and then we'll confirm that one until we look at the condition of the cable in a ROV flyover scenario.
Not that long, really.
No, it really isn't when you think about how we need to raise the funds up to allow for that replacement to occur. Next topic, Baylor Hill update. Do you want to take a break before we get there?
No, why don't we just keep going through, and we'll take one a little later.
The county has been, as we all know, is gotten their act together. I think we've got some forward progress. They have a new county manager that we met with. I think she's going to be. I think she's in the press and getting her sea legs underneath her, and will be tackling some pretty hard challenges for us. But hopefully, she's up for the task. When it comes to Baylor Hill, we've submitted everything we need to submit in terms of the project request from county. The county has hired a third-party group. What was it? Davidson and Associates, I think is the name. And they're going to be putting together the final staff report to submit to the hearing examiner. And then that hearing examiner process we anticipate to take place probably towards the later stages of September. And that's when our hearing will take place. And but I think we've done everything on our side to get all the information that they need. We've yet to hear back from the third party from Davidson at this stage. I anticipate having that conversation, or at least staff does, within the next, I don't know, couple of weeks once they've had a chance to look through the files. And if there's any follow-up information that they're going to request, we'll obviously respond back. But we've done everything. When we first started the project, if you guys recall, we did a pre-development permit review and went through that whole process. So we've provided all the information that's requested and then some, and we've provided everything we need to for us to move forward with the hearing. Any questions on the Baylor Hill update? We'll let you guys know for Baylor Hill. We have a town hall scheduled for the title we talked about. Krista, when is the solar discussion taking place? Is that shortly thereafter?
Well, we were kind of waiting to hear what our when our hearing meeting is before we set that town hall on that. So we could really do a big push, get people all excited again.
Yeah, what we wanted to make sure is that, when it became a real project, I think people have, are in the wait and see mode. As we know that there's going to be a decision made in preparation for that, we'll have another town hall and make sure that we have a good discussion with our membership about the project components and so forth. Good background, by the way. We've done some good update information. You can see a link there on the webpage. General manager report, just keep rolling, Vince.
Yeah, let's go through it.
Okay, we have, those are the, some of the dashboards that we have in Quick Facts. Just those are great resources if anyone is curious. And we continue to provide more and more information that's helpful to know. Hopefully we can get those other tier 1, tier 2 reports. Maybe we could do those in a dashboard format, Wendy, and see if we can upgrade those facilities accordingly. It'll be kind of fun. Some of the grants that we've done, you kind of label them out here. These are the grants we're seeking the resilience and some big submarine cable projects that we're looking at for a new submarine cable that connects us to the mainland. One of our cables is reaching capacity and having the ability to run our entire community on one of the 2 submarine cables is what our practice has always been. And for us to continue that from a risk perspective, we really do need to install a new submarine cable. So we have a grant implication for that. That's probably the biggest grant need that would benefit our membership in so many different ways. So that's the big component that we've been really pushing for. We have, if everyone understands that we have the title project that we're going to have our workshop about. Remember, that's just an investigation process that we're going through right now for the next year. And we'll see the results of that and report back to the membership. But we got a lot of work to do on a go, no go decision on that one. So stay tuned. We'll have a lot of updates to go with it. Some of the grant awards you guys have already seen. I won't go through them individually, but just know they're there. Finance, we've spent a lot of good time going through financials. This is a little bit different table. This goes through the end of the year as opposed to the other one was through the second quarter for the most part. So this one projects what the economics look like through the end of the year, which are similarly positive and all good. You can see the mechanisms that we have in place to ensure that our financials are met with our ECA and so forth, some of the other tracking mechanisms. Let's keep going. We have an estimation of weather is always a big component for us. You can see a couple charts that we track regularly. The charts that we have right now, our HDD has been lower than we anticipate. Remember, that's the heating degree days. So this is a chart that lays out the our estimations for HDD, and the blue line is colder conditions, La Nina. The red line is El Nino, warmer conditions. We sell less power. We always want to be, if we had a preference, to be right in the middle of those. And that's the yellow line. And if anything, at the beginning part of the year, which is a little selling less power, that had us a little bit nervous. But I think some of the growth that we have, because more people are utilizing their local homes more, as counterbalance that. So that's a good situation to be in. We were, when there's a really strong El Nino condition and the power sales drop, having the ability for people to use more power locally in the summertime and wintertime is a big benefit for our co-op financially. The predictions are for more of a La Nina weather condition. You can see the highlighted by the blue chart versus the color red. That's minimal. So we'll see if that outlook comes to reality. Love some of the energy assistance programs that we have. Really proud of this co-op for all we do for those in need. And we lay them out, and really proud of those. So we do a really good job taking care of our own, and that's what we should be doing. EAP, Energy Assistance Program, you see the figures that go along with that, as well as Project PAL, LIHEAP, and Department of Commerce is always great with our with getting additional help from our members. Our switch it up numbers, these are just fascinating. What we did is we opened it up to new construction and other solar projects. So right now, we've always had a lot of interest in ductless heat pumps, and those are kind of winning the figures so far between ductless and regular heat pumps. You can see that we're up there in the almost $8 million range. But look at solar, it's solar storage. So they're really coming up. 5 and 6 million plus. So that's pretty impressive for us. Energy savings, some of the other rebates that we provide, if you combine our rebates, you can see that we're doing a lot for the members. And what I'm most proud of is, it's one thing to say, hey, look, we need to be more efficient as individual members, and you can really you watch out for the high price of power coming down the road. But we actually have measures that people can implement in their homes today to save energy and become more energy efficient. So that's pretty impressive. Here's the solar stats that we have. Youth rally is it's always about the kids that are going to be the next generation taking over. And I think we're in good hands. I'm always impressed with our youth rally, and that just recently occurred, and Krista and company do a fantastic job as chaperones going and making sure that everyone's safe and having fun in our Nordine Jensen Youth Scholarship Tour. We also did a separate little tour to Decatur Island and Canoe Island. It's always about the kids, really fun. We had a visit from Alex Rommel. He visited the dump. And you know what's interesting is we've always been talking about putting solar on the landfill over at the dump, but it's really not allowed yet. There's a restriction going on that the Washington State needs to officially close the dump before you can actually put these kind of a solar project on it. So influencing Rommel and some of the other electeds is going to be essential for the transfer station to embrace a solar project, which was, kind of a natural to put something like that.
Is there a draft bill yet, or are we still just trying to get one?
I think that was the whole purpose of getting Rommel involved. But I haven't heard of a draft yet.
Okay.
In a prior life, I did some version of that in California, and it's pretty complex when you have a landfill area and you got to cap it with a clay layer, and you got to make sure nothing escapes, and the monitoring systems to put in play. And I have a tough time believing that any of those things have been put in place at our local landfill. So it may be a tall order, Mark. Here's our car show and always fun stuff. And then we have our historical museum. I hope, if you don't get a chance to attend today between 2 and 4, I really do hope that everyone has a chance to go over and look at the exhibit that we have, how we have electrified the San Juan service territory in the San Juans. Is really impressive. And I think everyone should really be proud of their local co-op over the years, not just, our generation, but the decisions that were made by other boards and the community back in the day. It's been pretty amazing. And they've really done a really good job. I mean, we're at the end of the line and really take care of our own, and some of the undergrounding that took place and some of the other things that were really tough decisions back in those days were pretty impressive. And anyway, be proud of the organization. I know I am. I always pinch myself every time I, look at all the undergrounding that was done before, I came on as the general manager. And it's really impressive that the board at the time came up with a whole undergrounding fee to make sure that happened, and it was embraced by everybody. So well done.
Hey Foster, how long will that exhibit stay on?
The exhibit's going to be there for a while. So I know you're going to be around for a while. Bring your kids. I don't know what the hours of operations, maybe Krista does, but we're just going to do like one dedicated 2 to 4 today, but it's going to be there for years.
Got it. Thanks.
Krista, do you know when it's typically open? I forget.
I don't know the hours either. I think they're like Wednesday through Saturday or something like that.
Something like that. More so in the summertime.
Yep.
Here's our
nation. So
There you go. Here's our Rock Island snapshot. We're focusing on that $15 million ARPA grant, and that really has us occupied. And in an exciting way, the 1,000 people we're connecting through those grant funds are members that I never thought that we could ever afford to connect. And so this is a big win for our community and for Rock Island sustainability that translates to, them being, or Rock Island being fully independent financially and then providing benefit back to the co-op in the form of equity because we all own it. So really turned out well. And with that, I just thought I'd give an update. There was, what we did is we asked the county council candidates, because there's a big election process going on, a series of questions of, what would they, how would they view power related aspects when they govern? And the responses, we've included that in our materials, and thought we would list those again for the people that made it through the primary. So we want to make sure that people understand where what positions that each of the candidates have for the series of questions that we asked. I think they're very informative, and I hope people read them and understand and make educated decisions on who to vote for accordingly and take us into consideration. So those are listed. And I don't see what else, anything else after that.
No, that's it.
And with that,
Okay.
we got a couple little executive session things.
Yeah,
But
so that'll be the end of our regular session. Christy, you might want to see if anybody in the public has any comments they want to or questions here at the end.
Yeah, are there any member comments at this time? We have a couple members still out there. No takers.
Okay, so we'll close out regular session now. It's 9:42. Why don't we reconvene for our executive session at 10 o'clock?
perfect.
Okay,
Thank you.
very good. Thank you, everybody.
Russell, can you stop recording? Krista?